No matter how structured our work is and how focused we are at a certain theme in our lives, we still wake up one day finding ourselves walking a new path. When I stepped into my classroom in the year 2000 as a grade 1 teacher, I had no idea that such a beginning would be the first step for another beginning. Me in the year 2020. I am Manal Zainuddin, and welcome to my podcast. I have been working in education for 20 years as a teacher, then a director. For someone who grew up loving the smell of books, collecting notebooks and papers simply because it was too hard for me to throw them away, studying and taking tests, yes, taking tests, and the traditional way of learning and then teaching were normal. At the beginning of my career, I was the teacher with the young, friendly face, but the strict, non-negotiable personality. Yes, non-negotiable when it came to right and wrong, when it came to writing on the line and telling children to erase to make the writing almost perfect, when it came to studying in the proper way, non-negotiable when it came to class rules and respecting values. My classes were active and fun as we did lots of active learning, acting out and laughing, but still within rules. But not to be harsh on myself, I was fair within the range of all those practices. I never set a rule without discussing it earlier with my students and ensuring that they knew it very well. I never embarrassed a child or hurt his or her self-confidence. I always planned to make things crystal clear and disciplined because I do care about the value of what we do. We are educators, interacting with beautiful children, innocent minds. I always did my best to show this value, self-respect, love, integrity, and appreciation to everyone in my environment, celebrating what was successful and helping mend what was not. But I was tough on myself, and most probably on others. When I became a mother and my children were growing from home toddlers to preschoolers, I noticed that they needed space and flexibility. I always offered a listening ear, but sometimes I wanted or expected things the way I knew them. But what I was seeing through them, growing in front of my eyes, under the same roof, different individuals with different interests and personal ways of doing things. That's when I started connecting the dots. The students I had been teaching, grades 1 to 12, and my children, learning hands-on about their development. It was a tangible experience, day and night, in which I learned an important lesson as an educator, to be more flexible and less strict. It was not too hard to learn that though, because there was a second lesson, and it was much harder. As a teacher first, I was doing perfectly well. I used to select and create innovative types of assignments. However, at a larger scale, this was a problem. When I became a director, I wanted to foster well-designed classes and lessons the same way I used to do as a teacher, which my students really enjoyed. But in such positions, I found myself seeing a broader picture, curriculum and assessment. It was the trigger to start a self-research, intertwined with my daily experiences in the field. After studying all those standards and educational systems, national Lebanese and Saudi, American, British, German, and few other systems, language arts, mathematics, and sciences, ratio of periods per subject, and the need to abide by the requirements of ministries of education and educational systems, I felt that blow. Yes, blow. Because I was a director, and I was there having to ensure that things were processed as expected. I had to prepare students and teachers for standardized tests. I had to assure to authorities that our curriculum met local and international standards. I could not cancel what I thought was useless. The truth is, I spotted so much that was useless. We were going in circles. Leaders, teachers, learners, and parents, so overloaded with tasks and obligations, yet we were still staggering to our feet, trying to figure out ways to practice real-world mathematics, scientific innovations, and language expression. PISA tests 2018, for example, showed results for thousands of students who are unable to differentiate between a fact and an opinion. It was also consuming the other beautiful, lively elements in a child's mind: general well-being, art, and music. That was when I extended another lengthy research and study, designed a holistic approach for learning, but I reached two conclusions. First, that I had to resign from being a director as soon as possible, because I knew I could not be part of that any longer. We cannot disregard the fact that more than 90% of the world's education has to follow an official system respectively, national and international. It's not something one can change overnight. Second, that I could not simply turn my back to all this and leave. I could work in those holistic educational models, Montessori, Waldorf, and the like, which do not incorporate books and textbooks. But I felt the responsibility to stay within these traditional organizations, to assist and guide in trimming the unnecessary material, those overwhelming objectives, and guide in designing multidisciplinary approaches for all types of practices. There is what I call clutter and chatter in education, which is leaving leaders, educators, parents, and more harmfully children, overwhelmed and stressed out and unhappy. That was the second lesson, standing to what I believed was true. It was hard, and I resigned. I decided to take the risk. Now I am a global consultant, supporting holistic education and building bridges for those who are still confined in the old school concept. We have to be global citizens and meet international education standards, and we can do that without the pressures. We have to be part of this industrial competitiveness, scientific research, and innovation, and we can do that without the pressures. And naturally, we can be accountable to ourselves and accountable for sustainable development goals, contributing truthfully, not just in superficial ways, but in tangible ones. When we are conscious of what we think, feel, and do, when we think about the well-being of every stakeholder, and when we are innovative, we can create models that meet the requirements without that burnout. Parallel to this comes the third lesson, which is incredibly challenging, and I admit I have to grin and bear it until I make peace with it: technology and screen learning. I always advocated nature, and my dream is to engage in nature education. Now, after years of global debates and opinions about technology and artificial intelligence, I find myself totally helpless, seeing children, including my own children, and adults spend hours doing language lessons, mathematics, sciences through a screen is something I cannot easily comprehend. I think my fellow partners, Margarita Hughes, Gavin McCormack, Whittled, and Magdalena Matulovic, and other educators know what I mean. We cannot deny that technology has made our lives much easier, more enjoyable, and even safer in certain situations. Without the internet, I wouldn't have been able to build my network with great minds from across this globe. But some will understand what I mean. Too much screen consumption and computation added to curriculum standards are causing lack of balance, as they activate the left side of the brain more than the right side. In today's infomarathons and infodemics, we need to remain balanced because we were born to be so. Our lives are too complicated, considering the adversities we see around us. This balance is a requisite. It is not a choice. My two children can't wait to go back to school, be with their peers, and play out in the open-air playground. We are still grateful because their school, the German school, provided sports and art classes online. But it was all through a screen. That's the sad truth. We have to accept screens into daily learning, especially with the hints that the next school year may involve blended learning. Thank you for taking time to listen to this first part of my story. That has been the scenario for the past 20 years, and I am certain every one of you has his own, with joys and sorrows, achievements and failures, hopes and disappointments. But we are still here, still discussing, debating, measuring, and evaluating. The process will not stop because life itself is a journey. I would love if you stay tuned for the second part of my story in my next episode. It is never about the destination. It is always about the journey. This podcast serves to highlight education communities from macro and micro angles, leadership, learning, personal and professional growth, stories, interviews, talks, projects, and more coming up from around this globe. Extending through this podcast, Plutarch's famous quote that I had posted in all the places I have worked in: the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. Until next time, let us keep this open-ended